The five-step process for AT consideration is an important support for IEP teams. You know, I like to think of it as having a recipe. And when I cook soup, I don't need a recipe. I can do that, and I figure I can't go wrong. But if I'm going to cook a souffle, you can bet I get out the cookbook and look at it. I need to know the ingredients, I need to know the steps. And that's the way I think you should think about having a consideration process. The first time you do it, or the second or third or fourth time you do AT consideration in an IEP meeting, I think you need something to guide your thinking and your discussion. Once you're an old hand at it, then you don't have to use the process. It will come naturally. Having the five-step process is critical to being successful. I think AT consideration is definitely linked to IEP goals and every other aspect of the IEP. When I'm on an IEP team, I can't possibly decide what AT is needed until I know what the goals are for the child. And that's true of knowing what accommodations a child might need for testing. How could I know that until I know what it is he's going to be asked to do? Now, sometimes a child's already using AT, and I can, figure out that probably he's going to need something else like that, but it may be a different tool this year. He may have changed, or the requirements of what he needs to do may have gotten more difficult or more demanding or changed in some way. So when I'm on an IEP team, I like to think about what is it we want him to do, and then what might he need to be able to do that successfully or more independently. And that leads to a decision about assistive technology. That's when you do the consideration. Under the law, assistive technology can be part of the special education program, it can be part of supplementary aids and services, or it can be a related service. They're really equal in terms of what they require the school district to do. Putting it any place in the IEP is just as powerful as putting it any other place. So it's really not an issue of, do I call it an accommodation? Do I call it a supplementary aid and service? I believe it's our job in the IEP meeting to write it down in a way that makes the most sense. The law doesn't really tell us who we need in an IEP meeting when we're considering the need for assisted technology. But best practice tells us that collectively we need to know enough to make a decision. Now, in reality, very few IEP teams have an AT specialist sitting in there with them at the meeting. What I think is critical is to follow the five-step decision-making process and to describe what it is you need assistive technology to do for that child. For instance, if he's struggling with getting the meaning from text because his decoding is so slow that he forgets what he just read, the team might decide that they need some way for the text to be read to him. That's what the IEP team needs to decide. Following the meeting, they can go out and call someone or go online or find some way to name 2 or 3 possible products that could do that for the child. So the IEP team doesn't need to know the name of the tools or where to get them in order to consider appropriately. What they need to think about is the tasks that are required of the child and where he's getting stuck, what's going to interfere with his progress and keep him from progressing in the curriculum. When they've decided that, then they can just write that down. He needs something to help him write his math problems in a way that's legible. Whatever the task might be that's such a roadblock for him, you can call on someone following the IEP meeting to help figure out what the exact tool may be. What you need to know in that meeting is, how do we figure out what it is he needs to be able to do? That's the important part, and the five-step decision-making process really helps with that. The five-step consideration process really helps the IEP team do that.